I woke up to the sound of laughter. My laughter. Except it wasn't mine. It was a recording of me, echoing through the conference room where my boss and my closest coworker were playing back a secret audio I'd never known existed. They were mocking my voice, mimicking my nervous stutter during meetings, the way I apologized when others cut me off. I stood in the doorway, frozen, invisible, in the early morning darkness. They didn't know I'd come in early. They didn't know I was listening. And that's when I saw it. The presentation slides on the screen. My project. My work. With Tessa's name plastered across the title. My name is Jennifer Scott, 32, marketing analyst at a mid-sized tech startup in Chicago called Neuron IQ. That night, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood there unseen, watching the people I'd trusted most tear me apart for sport and steal the very thing that had been my chance at promotion. That was the night I realized silence wasn't weakness. It was camouflage. The glass walls of the conference room glowed with harsh fluorescent light. Inside, my boss, Saka Holmes, sat sprawled in his leather chair, his feet propped up on the table like he owned the world. Maybe he thought he did. Beside him, Tessa Moore leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth as she laughed at the video playing on the big screen. It was me. My quarterly presentation from 2 months ago. The one where I'd stumbled over my words because Saka kept interrupting me. The one where I'd apologized 3 times for speaking up. Now they were replaying it like some comedy show. Tessa did an impression of my voice, high-pitched and shaky. Saka doubled over laughing, slapping the table. My stomach twisted into knots. I pressed myself against the wall outside the door, my breathing shallow. The hallway was dark. Nobody else was here. It was 6 a.m. I'd come in early to finish last-minute edits on the investor presentation. Instead, I was watching my own execution. Then the slides changed. My heart stopped. On the big screen, bold letters announced, Quarterly Strategy Overhaul, by Tessa Moore. My color palette, my data visualizations, my months of overtime poured into spreadsheets and market analysis, my sleepless nights researching competitor strategies, all of it packaged under her name. Saka pointed at the screen with pride. This is exactly what the investors want to see. Clean, professional, sharp. Tessa, you've really outdone yourself. Tessa beamed. Thanks, Saka. I worked really hard on this. My hands curled into fists. She worked hard? I'd sent her every single draft. She'd barely replied to my emails. And now she was taking credit for everything. The betrayal wasn't just happening. It was already complete. They'd planned this, rehearsed it. And I was standing outside like a ghost, watching my career get stolen in real time. I should have burst in, should have screamed. But I didn't. Something stopped me. Something cold and calculating. I turned away from the glass door, my legs shaking. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window across the hall. Pale face, tired eyes. The woman who'd believed merit mattered. The woman who'd trusted her boss when he called her the backbone of the project. The woman who'd smiled politely every time Saka ignored her in meetings. That woman was dead now. I walked to the elevator in silence, my sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The building was still asleep. Security guards rotated shifts downstairs. Janitors emptied trash bins. And somewhere on the 5th floor, 2 people I'd trusted were dismantling my future. I pressed the button for the parking garage. The elevator doors closed. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to disappear. And while they thought I was fading into nothing, I'd be building something they'd never see coming. Silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. 3 months earlier, everything had been different. Saka Holmes had called me into his office with a grin on his face. Jennifer, I need to talk to you about something big. I'd sat across from him, nervous but hopeful. He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. You know that quarterly strategy project? The one the board's been asking for? I nodded. I want you to lead it, he said. My heart soared. This was it. The break I'd been waiting for. 2 years at Neuron IQ, always working behind the scenes, never getting recognition. Finally, someone noticed. Really? I asked, trying not to sound too eager. Absolutely, Saka said. You're the backbone of this team. Nobody knows our market data like you do. I left his office walking on air. That night, I worked until midnight, sketching out ideas, building frameworks. This project would prove I deserved a promotion. it would change everything. I didn't know then that Sokka had already decided who'd get the credit. And it wasn't me. The small cuts started immediately. In the first team meeting, I presented my initial research. Sokka nodded along, then interrupted halfway through. So what you're saying is we need to pivot our messaging strategy, right? That wasn't what I'd said at all. But before I could clarify, he moved on. Great idea, Jennifer. Let's build on that. By the end of the meeting, my entire presentation had been reframed as his idea. Tessa chimed in with surface-level observations, and Sokka praised her insight. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need, Tessa. I smiled politely, told myself it didn't matter. The work mattered. The next week, I sent a detailed email outlining my progress. Sokka forwarded it to the team, with Tessa's name in the subject line. As Tessa mentioned, here's the latest update. I stared at my screen, stunned. He'd erased me with a single keystroke. When I brought it up privately, he waved me off. Oh, sorry, just a typo, you know how it is. I did know, and it kept happening. The breaking point came one Thursday evening. Sokka scheduled a client dinner to discuss the project's direction. I waited by my desk, dressed in my best blazer, checking my phone every 5 minutes. The meeting invite never came. At 7 p.m., I finally texted Sokka. He replied an hour later, "Oh shoot, totally forgot to loop you in. Already at dinner with Tessa and the clients. Next time." Next time. Like it was some casual oversight. But it wasn't. The next morning, Tessa posted photos on LinkedIn. Her and Sokka at some upscale restaurant smiling with champagne glasses. The caption read, "So honored to represent our team and present our vision to future partners." Our team. Our vision. I'd written every word of that vision. And I wasn't even in the room. That's when I realized I was being erased. Systematically. Deliberately. And if I didn't do something, I'd disappear completely. So I stopped fighting for credit and started collecting evidence. I returned to the office that morning after seeing them in the conference room. Nobody noticed I'd been gone. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I titled it Documentation. Inside, I began cataloging everything. Screenshots of emails where Sokka reassigned my work to Tessa, voice memos from meetings where my ideas were reframed as someone else's, calendar invites I was mysteriously left off. Every single instance of theft, gaslighting, and manipulation. I didn't confront Sokka, didn't send angry emails. I smiled when he walked by, said good morning to Tessa, laughed at their jokes in meetings. They thought I was clueless, thought I'd accepted my place as the invisible worker bee. But I wasn't fading. I was watching, learning. If I was going to be invisible, I'd use it as camouflage, and by the time they realized what I was doing, it would be too late. The hunt had begun, and I was patient. Sokka started holding weekly coaching sessions with Tessa. I'd see them in his office, heads close together, laughing. He never invited me. One afternoon, he called me in separately. I sat across from him, hands folded in my lap. "Jennifer? I wanted to check in," he said, his tone dripping with fake concern. "I've noticed you've been a little quiet lately, not speaking up in meetings as much." I forced a smile, just focused on the work. "That's good," he said slowly, "but you need to work on your confidence. Learn to assert yourself more, like Tessa does." Like Tessa? The woman presenting my work? The woman taking credit for my ideas? I nodded. "You're right. I'll work on that." Inside, I was cataloging every word, every condescending smile, every manipulation tactic. He was actually giving me ammunition. When I left his office, I added his comments to my documentation file. The picture was getting clearer. This wasn't accidental, it was calculated. 2 weeks later, the office celebrated Tessa's birthday. Someone brought cupcakes. We gathered in the break room, everyone singing off-key. Sokka presented her with a gift, a designer leather notebook, the kind with gold-embossed initials. Tessa gasped. "Sokka, this is too much." "You deserve it," he said. "You've been killing it on the strategy project." Everyone clapped. I watched from the corner, holding a paper plate I didn't remember picking up. That notebook. I'd given Sokka the exact same one last Christmas. Told him it was perfect for jotting down meeting notes. He'd thanked me, said he loved it. And now he was regifting it to Tessa. I set my plate down and walked back to my desk. The office felt smaller suddenly, suffocating. I was surrounded by people, and yet I was completely alone. But loneliness wasn't weakness. It was clarity. When you have nothing left to lose, you see everything clearly. And I was starting to see the whole picture. I stopped volunteering for extra work, stopped offering ideas in meetings. When Sokka asked me to review Tessa's slides, I did it with a smile, and left everything exactly as she wrote it, even the errors. I mirrored her fake politeness, her performative enthusiasm. They thought I was fading into the background, but I was studying patterns. I memorized Sokka's schedule, learned when he left his laptop unlocked, noted which files Tessa accessed in our shared drive. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was just paying attention. One evening, I stayed late. The office was empty except for the hum of computers. I walked past Sokka's desk and noticed something, a flash drive, forgotten beside his keyboard. I didn't touch it, but I saw the label, Budget Reallocation Draft. Interesting. I filed that information away. Knowledge is power. And I was building an arsenal. The next morning, Sokka's flash drive was gone. He must have remembered it overnight. But the seed was planted in my mind. Budget reallocation. What was he reallocating? I started digging through company financial reports, the ones available to all managers. Nothing seemed off at first, but then I cross-referenced departmental spending with project budgets, and there it was. Small discrepancies. Money shifted from team development funds into discretionary accounts. Funds that coincidentally aligned with Tessa's sudden spike in professional development opportunities, conferences, training programs, networking events, all things I'd requested and been denied. Sokka was funneling resources to her, building her profile, at my expense. I smiled to myself. This wasn't just workplace politics. It was financial misconduct, and every transaction left a digital trail. I didn't copy anything, didn't download files, but I knew where to look when the time came. Information is only powerful when used at the right moment. That moment was coming. I started playing the part of the eager student. One afternoon, I knocked on Sokka's door. "Hey, do you have a minute? I could use some advice." He looked up, surprised but pleased. "Of course, Jennifer. Come in." I sat down, adopting a vulnerable expression. "I've been thinking about what you said. About confidence. I want to get better. How do you think I can grow here?" His eyes lit up. He loved being the mentor. "Well, first you need to understand positioning. It's not just about doing good work, it's about making sure people see it." "Like Tessa?" I asked innocently. "Exactly," he said, leaning forward. "Tessa knows how to position herself. That's why I'm setting her up for bigger things. Honestly, between you and me, I'm grooming her to take over more leadership responsibilities. Maybe even replace some of the senior analysts." "Replace, meaning me?" I nodded, playing along. "That makes sense. She's really talented." My phone sat in my pocket, recording every word. The investor presentation was scheduled for 3 weeks away. Sokka announced that Tessa would be the primary presenter. "Jennifer, you'll support behind the scenes," he said in the team meeting. "Make sure the demo runs smoothly." The demo, our software showcase, built on code I'd helped develop, the centerpiece of the presentation. I nodded. Of course. That night, I stayed late. Alone in the office, I opened the demo file. The code was clean, functional. I didn't break anything. Didn't sabotage it. I just added one small feature. A metadata tag embedded in the presentation file, invisible to the audience. But if anyone checked the file properties, they'd see the original author's name. Mine. It was a standard feature in most software, something developers use to track contributions. Completely legal. Completely ethical. I saved the file and went home. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait. The days before the presentation passed in a blur. Sokka hovered around Tessa, coaching her on delivery. "Remember, confident eye contact, own the room." I watched from my desk, silent. One afternoon, Sokka stopped by my cubicle. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Jennifer, I know this project didn't turn out how you expected, but you'll get your turn eventually. Just keep working hard." I looked up at him, forcing a smile. "Thanks, Sokka. I appreciate that." He walked away, satisfied. He thought I was defeated, thought I'd accepted my fate. But beneath my calm exterior, my nails dug into my palms. "You already gave me my turn," I thought. "You just don't know it yet." That night, I cleaned out my desk, personal photos, my favorite coffee mug, the plant I'd kept alive for 2 years. I boxed everything up and loaded it into my car. Then I drafted my resignation letter. Short, professional, effective immediately. I sealed it in an envelope and tucked it into my bag. Tomorrow was the presentation. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past 3 months. Every insult, every theft, every moment I'd been made to feel small, but I didn't feel small anymore. I felt powerful. The kind of power that comes from knowing you've outplayed people who underestimated you. My alarm went off at 5 a.m. I showered, dressed in my best suit, and drove to the office. The building was quiet. I sat in my car, watching the sun rise over the parking lot. At 7:30, people started arriving. Saka parked his BMW in his reserved spot. Tessa pulled in 10 minutes later, carrying a garment bag. She was changing into something special for the presentation. I waited until 8:15. Then I walked inside. Nobody noticed me slip into the back of the auditorium. The lights were dimmed. Investors filled the front rows. Executives sat along the sides. Cameras recorded everything for the company's internal network. And at the front, Saka and Tessa stood by the podium, smiling. Showtime. The presentation began smoothly. Saka gave the opening remarks, talking about Neuron IQ's vision. Then he introduced Tessa. I'm thrilled to introduce Tessa Moore, the brilliant mind behind our new quarterly strategy. Applause rippled through the room. Tessa stepped forward, confident and polished. She clicked through the slides, my slides, with practiced ease. She talked about market analysis, competitive positioning, growth opportunities, all my words, my research, my months of work. I sat in the back row, invisible. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. She reached the final section. And now, I'd like to show you our demo. She clicked to the next slide. The screen went blue. Our software interface loaded, numbers scrolled, graphs populated, everything worked perfectly. Then, in the bottom corner, a small notification appeared, white text on blue background. File properties, original author, Jennifer Scott. The room went silent. Tessa froze, her smile faltered. Saka's head snapped toward the screen. Investors leaned forward, murmuring. Someone in the front row pointed. Who's Jennifer Scott? An executive called out. Tessa stammered. That's just a technical glitch. The file metadata. But the damage was done. The investors were already pulling out their phones, taking pictures. One of them stood up. Excuse me, but if this is Tessa Moore's project, why does the system say someone else created it? Saka rushed to the podium. There's been a misunderstanding. Jennifer is one of our analysts. She assisted with some of the background work. Background work? The investor cut him off. The file says she's the original author, not a contributor. The author. The murmurs grew louder. Tessa's hands shook as she gripped the podium. Saka's face turned red. I exhaled for the first time in months. My lungs filled with air that felt different, cleaner. The truth was out. Not because I'd shouted it, but because I'd embedded it where they couldn't erase it. I stood up from my seat and quietly slipped out of the auditorium. Nobody noticed. I was still invisible. But this time, it didn't matter, because my work had spoken for me. By the time I reached my desk, my phone was buzzing. HR Saka. 3 missed calls from Tessa. I ignored them all. I pulled the resignation letter from my bag, walked to HR's office, and slid it under the door. Then I packed the last few items I'd left behind and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Saka rushing down the hallway, his face pale. Jennifer, wait! The doors shut. I descended in silence. In the parking garage, I loaded my box into the trunk and sat in the driver's seat. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. From the head of HR. Subject, urgent meeting required. I deleted it without reading. Then I opened another email. This one was from a rival company, Apex Innovations. I'd sent them my portfolio 2 weeks ago. They'd responded yesterday. We'd like to offer you the position of senior marketing strategist. Start date flexible. I replied, I accept. Start date, Monday. The fallout spread faster than I expected. By that afternoon, the investor presentation video had been uploaded to Neuron IQ's internal network. Someone leaked it. Within hours, employees were sharing it in private message groups. By evening, it was on LinkedIn. Industry blogs picked it up. Tech Startup's presentation exposes internal plagiarism. The comments section exploded. People tagged Neuron IQ's official account, demanding answers. Saka tried damage control, posting a vague statement about internal review processes. But the internet doesn't forget. Someone dug up old emails, found inconsistencies in other projects Tessa had claimed. The board launched an investigation. Saka was suspended, pending review. Tessa's LinkedIn went dark. Her profile, once filled with self-congratulatory posts, disappeared overnight. I didn't gloat. Didn't post anything. I just watched from a distance as the house of cards collapsed. They'd built their reputations on stolen work. And when the foundation cracked, everything fell. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I just made sure the truth had a spotlight. 2 weeks later, the investigation concluded. The board found evidence of systematic misconduct. Saka had been reallocating budget funds to inflate Tessa's professional profile. He'd falsified project reports, reassigning credit from multiple team members, not just me, to her. The goal was to fast-track her into a leadership position. Why? Speculation ranged from favoritism to something more inappropriate. The board didn't care about the why. They cared about the liability. Saka was terminated. Severance revoked. Tessa was let go the same day. No severance. No references. Their careers in tech were over. Neuron IQ's reputation took a hit. 2 major investors pulled out. The company's valuation dropped. Layoffs followed. I watched it all unfold from my new office at Apex Innovations. My desk overlooked the Chicago River. My title was embossed on a nameplate, and my work, my real work, was finally being recognized. My new manager called me into her office one morning. "Jennifer, I wanted to tell you, that presentation video, that's how we found you. We've been looking for someone with your strategic vision." I smiled. "Thank you, I'm glad to be here." Months passed. I threw myself into my new role. Apex was everything Neuron IQ wasn't. Collaborative, transparent, fair. My ideas were heard, my contributions were recognized. I led a team of 5 analysts and we launched a campaign that increased client engagement by 30%. I was promoted to Director of Strategy within 6 months. One evening I was working late when my phone buzzed. A LinkedIn message. From Tessa. I stared at the notification, debating whether to open it. Curiosity won. "Jennifer, I know I don't deserve a response, but I need to say I'm sorry. I got caught up in Saka's manipulation. I thought I was advancing my career, but I was just being used. What we did to you was wrong. I've spent the last 6 months in therapy, trying to understand how I became that person. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." I read it twice. Then I closed the app. Some apologies don't need responses. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. I didn't wish her harm, but I didn't owe her closure either. A year after the presentation, I walked past Neuron IQ's old office building. It was empty now. The company had downsized, moved to a smaller space across town. The glass windows that once glowed with ambition were dark. I stood on the sidewalk, looking up. A year ago I'd been invisible inside those walls. A ghost in a company that didn't value me. Now I was standing outside, free. I didn't feel anger anymore. Didn't feel bitterness. I felt something quieter. Relief. I'd reclaimed something they'd tried to take. Not just credit. Not just recognition. I'd reclaimed my voice, my worth, my power. They thought erasing my name would erase me, but I was never just a name on a slide. I was the work itself, the strategy, the vision, and that couldn't be stolen, only acknowledged or denied. They denied it, and it cost them everything. I turned away from the building and walked toward the river. The city stretched out before me, full of possibilities. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. My new team at Apex threw me a surprise party for my 1-year anniversary. They decorated the conference room with balloons and a cake that read, "Cheers to Jennifer." My manager gave a speech. A year ago, we brought Jennifer on board, and in that time, she's transformed how we approach strategy. She's not just brilliant, she's generous. She lifts everyone around her. The room applauded. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. This was what I'd been searching for. A place where hard work wasn't invisible, where contributions weren't stolen, where people saw you not as a tool, not as a stepping stone, but as a person. After the party, I returned to my office. I opened my laptop and pulled up an old file. The documentation folder, the one I'd built during those dark months at Neuron IQ. I read through it one last time, every screenshot, every email, every recorded conversation. Then I closed it. I didn't need it anymore. The evidence had served its purpose. The truth had been told. And I'd moved on. That night, I drove home through downtown Chicago. The city lights shimmered against the dark sky. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Invisible, silenced, erased. And I thought about the woman I was now. Seen, heard, valued. I didn't wake up invisible that night in the conference room. I woke up free. Free from the need to prove myself to people who'd already decided I didn't matter. Free from the belief that silence meant weakness. I learned that invisibility isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's a gift. It lets you see the truth without distraction. It lets you move without being noticed. And when the moment comes, it lets you strike with precision. Sokka and Tessa thought they'd won. Thought they'd buried me under their ambition. But they forgot one thing. The invisible aren't powerless. They're patient. And patience, when combined with strategy, is unstoppable. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. The house was quiet, peaceful. I walked inside, smiling, because I'd won. Not by destroying them, but by building something they could never take, myself.